Hello, good evening, and welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Emily. I'm from the Fertility Network UK team, and tonight we're talking all about the donor journey from multiple perspectives, hoping to give you a better idea of what to expect along with some practical advice. I'd like to welcome our guest speakers, Becky from Defining Mum, Laura Rose from the LGBT Mummies Tribe, Michael from Two Dads UK, and Angela, who is the chair of the British Infertility Counselling Association. We'll begin with presentations from our speakers about their experiences and advice for anyone on their own donor journey, and we'll then move on to talk about fertility counselling. A trigger warning before we begin: some slides do contain images of newborns and families, so if this is sensitive for you, feel free to minimise the screen and just listen to the audio for these presentations. At the end of these presentations, we'll go into Q&As. So I'll kick off by introducing our first guest speaker, Becky. Becky started her blog and social platform Defining Mum to share her story of building her family with donor eggs. She's also launched a platform, Path to Parent Hub, to offer support for those on their own donor conception journeys. Over to you, Becky.
Hi, so I'm Becky from Defining Mum, and I suppose my story started back in 2014. So I was 27 at the time, and my husband and I decided that we wanted to start a family, and we thought it would be easy, as most people do when they go down this route. And so we started trying, and it was after about 6 months that I started to notice that my cycles weren't quite right. They weren't quite what I expected. I was having them every 12 to 20 days, for example. And because of my age, it took quite a while to get my GP to listen and to run some tests. But eventually I did have some tests run, and that led to a diagnosis of premature ovarian failure. And that basically meant that my egg reserve was very, very low, pretty much that of somebody who maybe in their late 40s, early 50s. And so I was given some hope in that my age would mean that any eggs I did have would likely to be of good quality. But we just had to try and find that golden egg. And so we went straight into IVF, and we were told that that would be our best option. We self-funded, and we went through our first cycle, and we managed to get one embryo from that cycle, which was transferred to me. And yeah, lo and behold, I became pregnant on that first cycle. And I remember thinking, oh, this wasn't as bad as I thought. It was actually quite easy. And sadly, that pregnancy ended at about 8 weeks when I had a miscarriage. And we found that devastating. But we found hope in the fact that we were able to get some eggs, and we were able to get pregnant. And so we went into another cycle, and we ended up having 4 cycles pretty much back to back, really, where either we made it to embryo transfer but had a negative result, or we just didn't get an embryo to transfer. And I suppose that's where during that process, where we started to consider donor eggs. Yeah, it was during that time we started to explore other options. We were told by my consultant that I had 5% chance with my own eggs and over 50% chance if we used donor eggs. And it took time for us. It wasn't a quick decision, but we came to the conclusion that we wanted to build a family, and that donor conception and donor eggs would give us that opportunity, and would give me the opportunity to carry a child and still have that biological link that I really wanted. And so we decided to travel to Prague, which is where we had our treatment back in 2015. We were really, really lucky that our treatment worked on the first cycle. So we had 5 embryos as a result of our donor's eggs and my husband's sperm. And I had 1 transferred, and that resulted in my eldest child now, Mila, who is now 4.5. And then we went back out to Prague a year later to try again for a sibling, and we're very fortunate that we were successful again. So we then had Eska and Lena, who are my twins, in 2018. So I now have 3 girls, all thanks to donor eggs. And I think there's a sentence that I used when I recently wrote about our story that kind of really resonates for me, and it's something that I didn't really realise at the time. And it was the fact that being told that you can carry a child, but they won't be genetically related to you, is such a hugely complicated piece of news to process. And I sit here and I tell my story, and it feels so easy, it rolls off the tongue, yet that time of my life was the hardest time that I've ever been through. And there was no sort of path towards making that decision that was smooth. It was up and down. We one moment we thought we were going to go with it, the next minute we weren't sure. I was in denial at first. My husband wasn't on board at other points as well. And so it's one thing that I really want to emphasize is almost the magnitude of this decision. And I remember at the time thinking to myself, come on, Becky, pull yourself together. Why are you struggling so much with this? It's not that big a deal, but actually to me it was. And it's only now I've been through that process and I look back that I realized what I was experiencing back then was grief. And it was grieving the loss of the dream that I'd always had, the loss of the dream of being a mum in the way that I thought I would be. I remember playing with my dolls as a little girl, and I would imagine that at some point during my life I would have a child and I would potentially have a little mini me. And so I had to really redefine in my head what it meant to me to be a mum. And that's where the name Defining Mum came from, really. And it was at the point where I started to focus less on the things that I would be losing in terms of a genetic connection and more on the things I would be gaining in everything I would get to do with my child every day, the nurturing and just the day-to-day family life that otherwise I wouldn't have been lucky enough to experience. And I suppose one of the biggest takeaways for me was that the real importance of emotional support when you're on this journey. And these are just some words that I pulled together after running a poll with my Instagram followers. And I had sort of almost 400 responses, just sharing words that they felt when they were going through this path and this journey. And you can see in there the real kind of difference and extreme of emotion, right from hope and excitement and possibility through to grief, shock and denial, and feeling very scared at the prospect of going down this pathway. And so one of the things I try to raise awareness of is that importance of emotional support, and it's being kind to yourself and realizing that this decision isn't just the next step in a medical procedure to bring you a baby. It's a decision that has lots of implications both for you, for your future family, and for your child as well. And so my advice would be, so be kind to yourself, allow yourself time to grieve. Know that people will make these decisions at different paces as well. So I mentioned earlier that both my husband and I were kind of for the idea and then against the idea at different times. And it was really important that we took time to have conversations together to properly talk and explore how we were feeling about this decision. And my third piece of advice would be to seek some professional counselling if you need to. I never actually had the implication session that is held in the UK when it comes to donor conception, but I did seek some personal counselling as I was going through infertility. I really struggled with my mental health during that time. And just having that safe space to allow me to talk about how I was feeling in particular about it, how I was feeling about losing my genetics and the worries that I had, just really helped me kind of work my way through that, even things that I didn't feel I was able to say to my husband. My next piece of advice would be to find your tribe and find others who are going through this journey, others who have been through this journey, and just have that ability to connect with people who truly understand and truly get how you're feeling. And I would guarantee that any of the worries that you have as you're approaching this journey will be felt by many others too. I actually found somebody at the time, it was before Instagram really took off in terms of fertility support. I found someone through a Net Mums forum of all places, and she had a little boy through donor eggs. And it was really a turning point for me in terms of seeing what life could be like. And I met with her and I saw the relationship that they shared. And I realized that although genetics are important, it's not everything when it comes to making a family. And there is so much more to being a mum. So my next piece of advice would be to educate yourself. So there are lots of things when you come to donor conception, it can feel like a real minefield. And so it's trying to gather information around things such as choosing the right clinic for you, choosing where to have your treatment, and the implications for that as well. So do you stay in the UK where donors tend to be open at the age of 18, or do you go abroad, which tends to be anonymous donation depending on the country you go to? And it's just really exploring what that means for you as a family and what that means for your child as well. And other things such as listening to different perspectives. So hearing from other people that have been through it, but also hearing from donor conceived people themselves as well, I think is really important to kind of visualize what it may be like beyond actually having that baby in your arms, that baby that will grow into a child and into an adult themselves. And finally, hopefully to put your minds at rest, know that many of your fears may well turn out to be unfounded, and that's what I found, and many people I speak to have said they're worried about things such as bonding with their child. Would I love my child as much? And from everyone who I have spoken to, those fears have been unfounded. And I always say, and I feel like I say this a lot, but I couldn't love my girls any more than I do if they were genetically mine. And I wouldn't change them or how I came to have them for the world. I think now I look back and kind of realise that our journey was supposed to take us this way, and we will always be open with them about their story and support them as they grow. So bearing all of these things in mind, and all of the things that I wish I'd have had back when I was on this journey myself, I've created a platform now which is called Past to Parent Hub. And Past to Parent Hub is a platform for you to connect with other people. It's a space for you to get information. So I hold monthly webinars on different topics. So this month we're focusing on attachment and bonding with your donor conceived child. And there's also plenty of support on there too. So I hold monthly support groups for people who are trying to conceive, but also people who are now parenting as well through donor conception. So yeah, that was the end of my presentation. I'm really happy to answer any questions that anyone may have later on. And I'll hand over to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Becky. That was great. And I think you're right. It's so important to be kind to yourself and allow yourself that time to process. So our next speaker is Michael from Two Dads UK, a platform created to share their experience with surrogacy and to campaign for equal treatment. Two Dads UK are also about to launch My Surrogacy Journey, which is a non-profit designed for surrogacy support. And I'll pass over to you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, so I'm going to be sharing my screen with you all now. So just bear with me one moment. Okay, just to echo some of the other sentiments in the previous screen as well, I've also got some images in my presentation, some birth images. So if these are a trigger to you, then once the timeline slide starts, that's where they'll be contained. So if that is a trigger, please feel free to minimize your screen. Okay, so who are Two Dads UK? So Two Dads UK is myself and my husband Wes, and we are fathers through UK surrogacy. Our fertility journey also started in 2014 when we began researching ways to build our family through surrogacy. When we began our journey, we knew nothing about surrogacy. We didn't know where to look. And we didn't understand the difference between the not-for-profits that work in the UK and the independent groups that also exist. It was really, it was an eye-opening experience, certainly for us both, to understand not only our first insight to the trying to conceive community and just how connected and supportive that underground network just was for us. Back in 2014, the not-for-profits that we approached all had a closure on their registrations for intended parents. So that meant that we would need to source our own surrogate ourselves and network within the trying to conceive communities and have an unsupported journey. We carried on and we began to do all our own research into surrogacy. What we did along that journey, or what we aimed to do along that journey, was all of the information that we learned and the information that we gathered, we have collated that and have continued to share that through our platform, Two Dads UK. We created an Instagram account at the very start of our fertility journey to essentially help destigmatize surrogacy and to normalize same-sex parenting. There weren't very many accounts that I could follow, or very many people on social media that could sort of signpost or give me any support that we might need, being two gay men on a fertility journey. We embarked on our surrogacy journey. So our first stage was to find a particular clinic, which, as you might know, can be a daunting experience as it is. Not only being two men in a fertility clinic environment, even back in sort of 2015, it still felt massively alien to us, and the choice was huge and overwhelming. What we very quickly discovered are the number of fertility clinics that have surrogacy programs. So one of the first pieces of key advice I would say is that when you are looking at choosing a fertility clinic, really dive deep and dig down into some of their cycles that are specifically related to surrogacy. It's a hugely consented and regulated procedure, so therefore making sure that clinics have experience with surrogacy is super important. So our journey began. My husband, as you can see from these pictures here, he had a daughter when I met him from a previous straight marriage. So that was great news to me. I'd always wanted to be a parent. So when I discovered that he had children at the time, it excited me that we were going to get on this path to fatherhood together. So we were always going to use my sperm, and that was always the decision with our particular journey. Some same-sex couples tend to maybe go for the best embryo, or look at their sperm quality to see who might go first in that particular situation. But for us, it was always going to be myself for our first child. So we found a clinic, and we worked with a clinic in Manchester for our first journey. So we chose Care Fertility in Manchester, who had a very active gay surrogacy program. They helped us find our egg donor, of which our criteria was we matched our egg donor to Wes's characteristics. So we wanted a blue blonde donor, as that was his physical characteristics. And as you might know, egg donation in the UK is anonymous, and therefore what we wanted is a donor that would match that particular criteria as we were using my gametes. So after about 6 months, a donor was found for us, matching our criteria, and we began the journey with our surrogate. And it's probably important to say that we dived right into the independent sector for surrogacy. So within surrogacy, you've got a number of not-for-profits that operate. The main ones being Surrogacy UK and Brilliant Beginnings being the main two. And as it was mentioned at the start, we're launching My Surrogacy Journey this month. So when we found our surrogate independently, which was online, we took a period of time to get to know her and her family before we started any fertility treatment. We actually took nearly 8 months in building a relationship and a friendship with Caroline before we embarked on any fertility treatment. As you can see from this particular slide here, we now have 2 children together, and I'm going to come on to our timeline in a second, but you can see them from the images here with Katie, which is Wes's daughter too. So in terms of our history, as I've mentioned, in terms of where Wes and I started our journey, we got married in the August 2014, and as I've just explained, we matched with our surrogate, which is a term that we use in the surrogacy community when you've decided to embark on that journey with your surrogate. So we matched in 2015. That particular journey meant that when we were matched with our egg donor, we were told, because we wanted a donor with proven fertility through that particular clinic. That donor produced 4 eggs, which we were told was low, but that egg quality would be excellent. And all of those eggs became blastocysts. So we were really lucky to use one and freeze the rest. And you can see from this particular timeline, our IVF began in December 2015 in terms of starting to complete all of our tests once our sperm had been quarantined, etc. And we began our embryo transfer in 2016. In the February the 13th, 2016, we had a incredibly healthy pregnancy. Our surrogate was incredible. And then Tallulah was born on the 16th of October, 2016. We always wanted a second child. We always wanted for my husband to then have a genetic link to our child. But because our original donor had only donated the number of eggs that she did, we asked the clinic to find us another donor. They did, because the current donor that donated the first time to us couldn't do a second donation due to ill health. So they found us another donor, but unfortunately we had a failed cycle that resulted also in all of our embryos being lost as well. So massive blow for us. We decided to take some time out of that particular fertility treatment as it was costly and emotional, something that I'll talk about in a moment. So what we did is we took some time out in that particular summer when that transfer failed in June 2018. We took a few months out. Our surrogate wanted to recover, get her body working back to normal again, and then we began medication shortly after. It was just before that particular time that a friend came forward to donate her eggs. Something for us that we hadn't considered known egg donation before. But in her words, she was just donating excess cells, and that's exactly how she thought of it. What made this journey even better, not only she was a friend, but she also worked within the fertility industry. So she was an absolute beacon of hope, but also this incredible knowledge bank that really helped us on our particular journey. So Fran donated her eggs. My husband fertilized those eggs, and we were really lucky to have 7 blastocysts, of which we transferred 1 at the beginning of December 2018. And that resulted in the birth of our son Duke, that was born on the 20th of August 2019. One of the things that I wanted to talk about specifically with a surrogacy journey is, and one of the things that I absolutely underestimated is, one, the importance of counselling. And there certainly sounds like there's a theme with this particular session tonight, but I can't stress enough the importance of talking to your fertility counsellor about your particular journey. And yes, you will have implications counselling, but there are also options to take additional counselling if that's needed. For me in particular, an area that I really struggled with after the birth of Duke was something that Becky also touched on, and that's that genetic loss that I also grieved a little bit. I found the bonding with him exactly the same as it was with Tallulah, who I had a biological tie to, but I found that I was more susceptible to everybody else and to the power of language and words, and overcompensating for not being his genetic father. In my eyes, I was less of a dad to him, which I now know wasn't the case. I wished I'd have taken more counselling to talk about being a non-biological parent. I would have absolutely benefited massively from it. I think it would have dramatically changed the first 3 months of Duke's life. I found that quite isolating and quite stressful, and also being the main carer for him in that particular early time, which was my choice, so I could bond. In actual fact, by not taking additional counselling, I think I did more damage to myself and my own mental health at that really key time. The lessons that we've learned in all of this, we then go on to support other people that are on a fertility journey. So whether you're straight or whether you're from the LGBTQ community, we have supported now over 300 individuals on a pathway to parenthood through surrogacy in the UK. As you might know, surrogacy in the UK is altruistic, which means commercial surrogacy isn't permitted. And therefore, anyone that works in this particular space works through a non-profit organisation. Organisations that I would fully recommend if surrogacy is a particular option for you would be to consider organisations like Two Dads UK, Surrogacy UK, Brilliant Beginnings, and My Surrogacy Journey. Other things that I would just like to just finish off before we do, some of the lessons that we definitely learned on our particular journey was the journey time. A surrogacy journey generally tends to be between 2 years and sort of 28, 29 months. It can take up to 6 months to find a donor egg if you're doing gestational surrogacy versus traditional surrogacy, which is when a surrogate will use her own eggs. So in that time span, as you can see from my time span on the screen, mine contained far more research in the early beginning as I was researching both international and UK surrogacy. But don't underestimate the importance of getting things right and doing your research and building those relationships, whether that's with your organisation that's supporting you or with your donor or your surrogate. Surrogacy in the UK is completely safe. But it is built on trust and friendship. So it's really important that you spend the time to get to know your surrogate and your organisation that you're working with. You can find out information on twodadsuk.com if you have any more information. And I'm happy to answer any questions in the Q&A either now or at the end of the presentation, whatever's best. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was great. And I think you're right. Getting counselling is just such a powerful, incredible tool. So our next speaker is Laura Rose from the LGBT Mummies Tribe, whose aim is to educate, share and celebrate LGBT+ women and people worldwide on their path to parenthood. The LGBT Mummies Tribe also works to bring policy change to ensure equality and inclusivity in healthcare. So I'll pass over to you, Laura Rose. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I'll just attempt to share my screen one moment. There we go. Just while it loads. So this is my presentation. Apologies. I will try to be quick because I'm conscious of time. So just discussing our journey, again, a trigger warning. There is a page with some images of our family and our babies. If you do find it uncomfortable, I'll try and rush through as quickly as possible, but you're more than welcome to turn off as well. I'll just come through. So our donor journey, my wife and I have been together for 14 years. We've been married 10. And just after we had our wedding, we decided to look at starting a family. Back then, social media wasn't very prevalent. And within our community and where we lived, among the LGBT+ community, we didn't know anyone really other than one woman who had children. So we kind of were a bit floundered. We kind of had to muddle through it. So, you know, we looked online, we looked at clinics, we found a clinic that we liked. So we used the London Clinic CRGH, and we used a US sperm bank with an open disclosure donor. So we used Zytec in America. It's a very strange experience to have to go online to shop. It did seem like a very strange shopping experience, looking for a donor, to find someone that met our expectations and what we were looking for, and to sit down and really make a list of the attributes, the physical, emotional and personal traits that we were looking for in a donor. And when you start off, you think you have this vision in your mind, and when you put pen to paper, it can completely change when you both sit there and put down exactly what you're looking for. So we looked at, you know, physical traits. What are we looking for in a donor? What do we find attractive ourselves, in people, in each other? We looked at each other's great traits, each other's bad traits, personality traits. My wife's very sporty. I used to be a performer, so I wanted someone musical with theatrical interest. See if we could find some middle ground, and we whittled it down to specific donors, and we looked at them, and then in the end, based on your CMV status, we found a donor that we were both really, really happy with. Strangely, when people say, oh, did you pick a donor that looked like either of you? No, we actually didn't. You know, I've actually got family from Bayesian descent, Scottish descent and Irish, and my wife is full English descent. And it wasn't actually something we considered, which is strange because most people look at the race of either parent and, you know, look for similar races or ethnicities, and we didn't. We went for a Puerto Rican donor, and, you know, we got down to the last two, and based on the CMV status and the fact that one donor had a really high history of cancer in his family, and I have quite a lot of cancer in mine, so it kind of made the decision for us, which was really helpful. And, you know, he was great. He had parts of both of our personalities. He was really compassionate. He had a great IQ, and he was very family orientated, which was really important to us. At the time, because there wasn't really much social media, there was no Instagram, we just really struggled. There was no one to really ask for advice or guidance. So we kind of just had to muddle through it ourselves. You're talking nearly 10 years ago. So we just got on with it. Then we ordered 14 vials, but it was due to issues conceiving our first child, which my wife carried. She had PCOS, and at a very young age, she was told she'd never carry. And when we found our clinic, you know, we looked and explored the fact of her carrying, and they did the test, and they said, absolutely, we can get you pregnant. It may take a while, it may be a difficult journey, but we will get you there. So we had, with my wife, carrying 5 cycles, 3 IUIs, 1 unmedicated, 2 medicated, that failed. We then moved to a highly medicated IUI, which unfortunately we miscarried, and we lost the baby at around 11 weeks, which obviously for anyone is a traumatic situation to be in. So we took time out for her to physically heal and us to both emotionally heal, and we conceived our daughter on the 5th attempt, which was absolutely amazing. By the time we got to our thinking about a second child, I was going to carry, because we knew that we would both want to be both bio and non-bio mum, and it was an opportunity for me to then be a biological parent. So I fell second try of IUI, natural cycle, which we were just completely shocked by, because I had it in my head. I was quite negative. Oh, it will take a while. And I fell really quickly, which, you know, we were really blessed with. And then last year, beginning of the year, we thought we wanted to have another child, and we looked into it. And I think you get yourself into a situation where, because we don't have the sperm there, it's just the fact that, you know, it worked before. I'm fertile, you know, I've had all these tests, everything's great. We had 3 IUI cycles and they all failed. So they had to do more investigative work to then find out that at the age of 34 or 33 at the time, my ovarian reserve had actually halved in the space of 2.5 years, which absolutely shattered me. I just didn't expect to hear it. You think at that age that you wouldn't experience these kind of issues that just happen over like so quickly. So we moved to IVF, which got cancelled due to the pandemic. So I just spent lockdown getting mentally and physically strong to move to IVF, and we had IVF, and we had 2 embryos transferred, really good quality. And we got in our head, yes, it's going to work. You know, the success rate's great. You know, it all looks great. Great quality embryos. It failed, and I absolutely was broken. And I think when you've had multiple failed cycles and you've gone through this emotional turmoil of doing it in a pandemic, I just mentally wasn't prepared for it. And we'd never tested early, and we made the fatal mistake of testing like 4 days earlier. And I knew then, because of all the research and the experience we have as an organisation, that it wasn't going to be a positive when we tested on day 14. So it did have a really detrimental effect on us both. And then I had a frozen transfer, and it works. So I am currently, apologies if trigger warning, but I am currently pregnant, 21 weeks, with our 3rd child. And there's some pictures of all of our family, our embryos, and our children. What we wish we'd known, there's so many different things to consider, and when you look back you think, oh, it's so obvious, why didn't we think of that? We wish that we'd had a community at the time to ask for guidance and just hear other people's lived experiences. Like the others said, it's so crucial to lean on people and hear different experiences. You know, had we known that reciprocal IVF was available, had we known that home insemination, or the different routes that were available to us in our community, it was very limited, as was the information. And hearing from other people and hearing the emotions in their experience, you can really, really get an understanding for that. Speaking about possible issues early on in the journey, we had implications counselling. I personally wish that we'd had more. I wish that we'd paid to have more. I think you do get in your head that, you know, oh, I've got to do this counselling session, and oh, you get excited and they sit there and they go through things and you go, yes, 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 we just can't wait to be parents. And then you get down the line and you don't revisit that, and you should really look back and revisit. And if you get to that point where you're struggling mentally, you need to, as a single person by choice or as a couple or co-parenting, really consider, do we need to take time out? Do we need to go back and have another session? It's really, really crucial, and it's a cost that, yes, it's a cost that, you know, at time you might not be able to afford it, but it's a cost that may really help you in the long run. Again, like with Michael, I really struggled as a non-biological parent with the genetic loss. The fact that I hadn't actually thought about it throughout the whole pregnancy, the fact that I would never have my first child look like me in any way, shape or form. I never actually comprehended that until we were at the hospital and we had our daughter. And on the day after she was born, the obstetrician was checking her and said, I want the mum. And I said, oh, I'm her mum. And she looked me up and down, worked out what kind of person I was, didn't like it, and said, I don't want her, get her out. I want the real mum. And in that moment, my whole world came crashing down, and it kind of just floored me. I didn't know what to say. I got really upset. She started getting heavy-handed with the baby, and I just said, give me the baby, and I rushed out crying. We did put in a complaint, and we were told it was something that had happened previously with this person, and, you know, it would be dealt with. We did put in a complaint. But for the next year and a half, I didn't feel valid in my role. I felt that I had to neurotically, you know, make people aware that I was the other mum in the street. Oh, baby's pretty. What's her name? Oh, I'm her mum too. You know, oh, I'm her other parent. I'm her other mother. I do it in every situation for a very long time. It put strain on our relationship. It put strain on my bond with the baby and other people in the family. And at times I felt so selfish and guilty. But when we put it out across our organisation to our community in the tribe and shared our experience, we had thousands from worldwide, all over the globe, come forward and say, you've made me feel valid. I felt selfish. I felt guilty. I've never talked about this, but I experienced and went through the same things you did, because I felt and had people say things to me or not address me in a scan. People would say, you're not the real parent. Well, she doesn't really, or he doesn't really look like you, or, you know, pass it to the real mum. All these kind of things, all that use of language, negative language, whether there's ill intent or whether people are actually being discriminatory, like in our situation, can really, really have a detrimental effect on you. And had someone sat me down with lived experience at the time when we were having treatment and said, someone may say this to you, they may say really awful things, or they may not mean it but get it wrong, and you may react in this way, I would have been prepared emotionally, and I would have known what to say to that doctor. I would have known how to address it when people made these comments, whether ill intent or with good intent. And I think foresight is a really, really important thing. Handling other people's opinions and questions, sometimes people really do just mean well, and they just want to understand your journey. And it's all about educating them. That is our job as part of our community. People don't understand all our roots to parenthood and who we are as people and our family journey. So if they're going to ask, you know, be upfront if you feel comfortable, confident saying it. And or you can say, I don't feel quite comfortable answering that question, but I appreciate that you've taken an interest. It's all about having a positive outcome and having those open conversations to educate people, so that next time they meet someone like you, they can better support them, or they can ask the question in a better way and pose it better. When we suffered our miscarriage, there is more support that is needed to support LGBT plus people, whether it's through surrogacy, like what Michael and Wes went through, or, you know, what we went through. I was never addressed after the miscarriage in appointments at the NHS. There were times I just was a third wheel, or oh, is this your sister? Or even in scans, oh, is this your nan to my wife? All these things that happen, you know, even though they are mistakes, they can hurt or they can be irritating. Asking open questions can really help. Inequalities across healthcare, at scans, appointments, discrimination, all these things can chip away at you being invalid as a parent, whether you're the bio or the non-bio, you go through a reciprocal IVF, any journey, any route, can have an effect on your relationship, your bond with the baby, or you feeling valid. how to support our children in their journey better. There wasn't any real educational resources or books around. Now we share them all over. We do book readings from authors. We share books that we've read to our children, because that's important to know, for our children to know where they've come from in an age appropriate way. And it might not be right for everyone how you do it. For us, our children have photo books with their story, their bedtime stories. 2 princesses wished upon a star for a baby, and God granted the wish. The doctor put the seed in mummy's belly and the princess was born. You know, you have your own journey and you'll make it appropriate for your children. So being able to support them in a way that as they grow up, they know their journey and their story better. And what I really, really wish that we had done is meet up with donor conceived children prior to hear what their experience was, but also what they wish that their parents had done, because I think that would have maybe had an impact on maybe some of our decisions. Having that in-depth lived experience explained to you, this is what would benefit me, or this is what benefited me in the long run. Having those conversations would have made a difference. Because of that, because of our personal experience, and because of the fact that we weren't supported, we were alone, there was no community, we realised, because we were being contacted consistently, that people needed a community, a safe haven to share, educate, share, celebrate their families or their journeys, or to come for us for guidance. So we created the LGBT Mummies Tribe, and it's for LGBT plus women and people who want support, guidance, and we provide support groups on the path to motherhood or parenthood. So we have 12 support groups which people can join online. We now hold online Zoom meetups where other parents can come together just to make new friends. We have UK events. We have about 130 to 140 families, bumps, people that are looking to conceive or adopt or foster come together and, you know, make friends, and the children can then see other children that look like them. So there's all different types of multiple routes for the LGBT plus community to come together and say, this is our options, make an informed choice and go down that route. We also are passionate about LGBT plus healthcare, and we work with the NHS directly in regards to pregnancy, birth and maternity and healthcare and beyond, trying to improve policy to support LGBT plus women, people and families going forward, because exponentially we're having lots of families a lot quicker now than we were 10, 20, 30 years ago, but policy hasn't moved on with us. But the great thing is the NHS and other organisations are really working hard to really listen and really want to care and make change for the better for us. These are just a few organisations that we work with, because we realise that within our remit and our lived experience and the research and the work we've done over the years, that we can't do everything. We're not medical professionals, so we work with clinics, sperm banks, we work with the College of Midwives, NHS Improvement, we've worked with Tommy's, Miscarriage Association, all these amazing organisations who want to best support the LGBT plus community and serve them better, and be able to say, look, we know we're not doing it perfect, we want to get better, show us, educate us in who you are as people. And these organisations here are working really, really hard to better support the LGBT plus community on their routes to parenthood. Our details are there. I just thought I'd put this in at the end. If there is anyone here who has any questions or who is looking to start the path to motherhood or parenthood, they're more than welcome to reach out, give us a follow, contact us, or join our support groups. And if anyone's struggling, or you know anyone that's struggling at the moment, especially in the pandemic, please let us know. We're here to support. So that's from me.
Thank you so much, Laura Rose. I think you're right. Community is such an important part of this journey. Our final speaker tonight is Angela, who is a specialist fertility counsellor with over 20 years of experience. Angela is chair of the British Infertility Counselling Association. Okay, over to you, Angela. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'll just get my slides up. I'm not doing very good now. There we go. Are they up okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Angela Pericleous-Smith. I'm a fertility counsellor. I'm the chair of the British Infertility Counselling Association, and I've worked as a fertility counsellor for approximately 17 years now. What I thought might be useful tonight was just to explain a little bit about what happens in an implications counselling session. I've heard a lot, and particularly recently in the last week or so, about an implications counselling session being a tick box or being a test. And so I just wanted to debunk some of those myths, really, that it's not a tick box exercise. And thankfully, all the speakers before me have kind of spoke about the value of counselling through this time. It's also not a test. We're not there to judge whether you're going to be a good parent or a bad parent. And I very much view it as an opportunity for you to explore your thoughts and feelings around the potential implications of creating your family in this way, or expanding your family in this way, just so that you are making a fully informed decision that is the right one for you and your family, and only you can make that. So it does provide the opportunity to explore the implications of treatment, and counselling is for anybody who is considering using donated eggs, donated sperm and donated embryos. That's for heterosexual couples, same-sex couples and single people. So the kind of things that are likely to be explored in your counselling session, and these are very fluid. I don't sit there with a list of things to ask you. This is kind of very fluid and with where you are. But one of the biggest things is your journey to this point. How have you got to this point? What traumas have you endured so far to get to this point? And there's usually, not always, but there's usually been a history for you to get to the point of seeking out donation or being informed that you need donation treatment. So part of that as well will also be about your feelings about being told that you require donation treatment and the loss and grief of your own fertility. Or it could be about, for example, a single person, your imagined life plan, how you imagined it to be. It's very far and few between that I've ever come across anybody that's ever expected to find themselves in a fertility clinic in the first place, or ever expected themselves to be considering donation treatment. So we'd look at the impact on you as an individual, you as a couple relationship, you with your family and other relationships that you might have, and that may or may not include kind of the impact that will be having on your relationships, such as psychosexual issues. Sibling rivalry is often one that comes out. So it's really about exploring your emotions, where you're at and how you're feeling about everything. And do you emotionally feel ready to form your family in this way? We'd also look about how you're feeling about your donor or a potential donor. As been mentioned as well already, we would really explore your thoughts and feelings about genetics, the connection, what the meaning of genetics are for you, your thoughts about how you might bond with your child, the balance in your relationship, if one of you will be genetically connected to your child and one won't be. If treatment is successful, how you might each feel during the pregnancy, birth and beyond, which again has been mentioned by the speakers, that there is feelings there afterwards. So this just isn't about before and about the treatment. This is about during and afterwards as well. Grandparents, social parenting, again, it's been mentioned, but how other people are observing you and your family. And the comment which I often hear from many people is about how people comment on how much their child looks like them and how upsetting people can find that. And really importantly, what support network you have around you. Sometimes it is about providing some information. I always think you can't make a fully informed decision and choice unless you know what all of your options are. So it will be looking at your potential options that are available to you, the availability and recruitment of donors, potentially how they're matched, availability of the profiles and photos, and on some donor banks you can get audio recordings and such, the costs, any age restrictions, waiting times, and some of the pros and cons and implications of using overseas donors. We'll look at and explore what the legal framework in the UK is, or overseas if you're used in a clinic overseas. Parenthood status, that is a question which comes up about the legal parenthood. The importance of knowing about the 10 family limit, which is in the UK, but not for overseas. So in the UK, there is a limit that donors can create up to 10 families, but that's not the same with overseas donors. And I think I've seen this in the questions, but we will explore kind of the possibility of future contact with the donors' families, potential genetic half siblings, any payments that are made to donors. People often have questions about whether their donors are being paid or compensated. Donors' right to withdraw consent. And I'll often try and explore from the donor's angle as well as to why they might be donating. Big thing in the UK over the last few years is, and not just the UK, but worldwide, is the implication of direct consumer DNA testing. There's now over 4 million kits which have been sold, and there's an estimated 25 million people on the database worldwide so far, which will only grow as the years go on. So we'll explore that and what that might mean for you and your family. The limitations of screening for genetics, diseases, and the implications if donors fail to disclose information. Information which is available on the donor, the non-identifiable information and the identifiable information, and any information about genetic siblings. And again, importantly, information which the donor can access. We will also explore openness with a child, whether you're planning on being open with your child about how they were conceived, any fears you have. A fear I often hear is that their child will turn around as a teenager and say, "You're not my mum," or you're not my dad. So we'll really kind of look at exploring your thoughts and feelings around that. Advantages and disadvantages of being open. This is your family and it's got to be right for what is right for you and your family and your child. Secrecy within family. If you are planning on telling your child how and when you might envisage, so we'll look at ways in which you could tell your child. So we'll really explore that for you, and the language that is used. And we'll also talk about whether your child has permission to be curious about how they were conceived, about their donor, about potential half siblings, and also about the future, preparing and managing your child's expectations and future contact with the donor or half siblings. There is no right or wrong way to feel. Everybody has the right to feel how they want, and what is right for you and your family may not be right for another person, but it's your life this is going to impact. And when I work with people, I'm really trying to explore what is right or wrong for you and your thoughts and feelings about this, because this is your life that you're going to be living. So it's really important you do what is right for you. Counselling is available via fertility clinics, and on the BICA website, there is also a Find Counsellor directory. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. That was great and really informative. Again, a huge thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening and to our guests who have presented. We will now go into the Q&A box and we'll try to answer as many as we can. However, With the time, if we don't get around to your question, feel free to just email me. I'll pop my email address in the chat box. It's emily@fertilitynetworkuk.org, and we'll then get back to you when we can. So we'll begin with a question from Hannah. So she and her partner are trying to decide whether to stay in the UK or go abroad to have their treatment. They're unsure of how they feel about anonymous donation versus non-anonymous in the UK with respect to how their future child may feel. So Becky, how did you feel about going abroad, making that decision, and was anonymity a consideration for you?
Hi, so yeah, it's a really complex one, and I think it goes back to not really having as much information at the time as there is now, and we made the decision to go abroad. Actually, the decision wasn't really fueled by the anonymity. It was mainly due to the waiting times and also the costs. So we had been through 5 IVF cycles in the UK, which we'd funded ourselves, and we weren't that hopeful, to be honest. We were saying this could take us another 5 cycles to get to where we want to be. So cost was a huge factor for us, as well as the timescale. So I had been on a waiting list in the UK for almost a year at the point we made that decision to go ahead. And we were still no closer to the top. And to be honest, my mental health at the time wasn't really allowing me to wait any longer. On reflection, I look back and I kind of wish I'd have known a little bit more about how donor conceived people feel about having access to their information and the right to know. It's a decision we've made that was right for us at that time, and we will be totally open and honest with the girls about why we made that decision. I'm totally supportive of them if they want to try and find out more. I do find comfort in the fact that there is DNA testing which is widely available now, which hopefully gives us a tool to use should they want to find out a bit more about their donor. But I think it's important, and I think looking back, you can be very, very tunnel visioned in kind of looking at, right, we want a baby and this is a way to get a baby, and it's quite often you don't think of that child as a child and then an adult. I almost couldn't allow myself to think past having a baby in my arms, and I think had I been able to do that, I probably would have looked more into maybe other options within the UK that may have been a less of a waiting time outside of my local clinic. And so yeah, those are my reflections. But I do think that going abroad offers options for other people. I think it is just kind of bearing in mind all of those implications that maybe not be front of mind, and I do think that many people who go abroad don't necessarily do it to circumvent the anonymity aspect. They do it for other reasons, which tend to be due to cost and timescales, and also in some countries you can know a bit more about the donor, in some countries you can know a bit less about the donor, and again that's personal preference in terms of what you want to know and what you're comfortable with. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. The next question is from Reese. This one is for Michael. So where does the couple start to search for a surrogate online?
Yes, good question. So if you aren't opting to have support through any of the nonprofits, then there are a number of really good and safe online communities. The majority of the larger groups operate on closed Facebook groups. Surrogacy UK have a closed Facebook group, which is an information page. And then there's a couple of really good groups that have intended parents, as well as surrogates unmatched and ones that are wanting to match. And it's, you know, the laws around surrogacy are the fact that you can't advertise for a surrogate in the UK. So this has to be a real sensitive process, but there are a number of really good Facebook groups. One of them is a group called Hope. It's a really friendly environment to network with other intended parents as well as surrogates.
Thank you, Michael. This next question, I think we can open up to all our panelists. So do you have any advice for the waiting time between treatments?
Is this in regards to fertility treatment, so between failed cycles or just waiting to be seen?
So the person who submitted the question has donor eggs ready for them in Spain, but they can't get out there anytime soon. So any advice for the waiting time? I think just generally anyone who's going through fertility treatment,
think because obviously it wasn't a very long wait for us, it was 2.5, 3 months. When the lockdown hit and we knew that we had to wait, there was nothing we could do. It is really frustrating if you know that something is completely out of your hands, specifically with the pandemic, because it's so unknown and it's gone on so much longer than you anticipated. I knew that emotionally, if I just sat there and thought about it indoors, because we couldn't go anywhere, I would just crumble. And between us, we had to look after our other 2 children at the same time. Really keeping yourself busy, finding hobbies that you really enjoy, focusing on them. Give yourself a few tasks to do a week, maybe a month, just to get you through. Try and find out what the timeline is. Keep your eye on the news, keep your eye on what's happening with the airports, but at the same time, have it in your mind that yes, it's a delay at the moment. Distract yourself with other things that make you really happy. Have date nights with your partner or your husband or your wife. Try and keep yourself busy with things that really make you content and happy. And at the same time, have it in your mind that the journey stopped for the moment. You're at a standstill, but it's not going to stop. You will get there. It's just going to take a little bit longer than you thought. And that got me through. I thought, I will be pregnant. I know I can get pregnant and I will get there. It's just not happening right now. And that's the thing that got me through. And I spent lockdown in the garden, getting in shape, eating really well, cleansing my body. All of those things, give yourself those tasks and it will really help you to get through it a lot quicker. So I don't know if that's helpful to you.
Yeah, I'd also add, we've been talking about the importance of counselling, and we've been talking about so much information out there, and with the kind of different organisations that are available. And so if like there are any sort of feelings you're struggling with, now's a really, really good time to have some virtual counselling sessions or connect with some other people. So I know there's some people through on Paths to Parent Hub who are in the same position, who are kind of wanting to travel out and they just can't because of COVID, and they are kind of connecting with each other. They're trying to find out as much information as they can at the moment. And I suppose it's personal whether you want to get more immersed in the information or whether you want to take this time to have a step back and do some nice things for you. So I think it's a bit of a balance, but yeah, try and if you can, try and see some of the time as an opportunity to do some more learning.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. It's a really uncertain time worldwide. Nobody knows kind of about travel and treatments and such. So one way is kind of trying to focus on kind of today and what you can control today, because focusing on when your treatment is going to be and when you can travel is kind of focusing on more uncertainty and more of the uncontrol that you don't have, which is already felt a lot in fertility treatment. So if you can kind of focus on today and your well-being, and almost like preparing for treatment, but kind of telling yourself that you're controlling what you can control today, so you're not thinking too far ahead in the future.
Thank you all. So we'll move on to another question. One thing that a viewer is concerned about is telling their child as early as possible how they were conceived, but they would rather it was a child's choice if and when they tell anyone. Do you have any advice about this, about when you tell other people outside of your family?
I can talk from my own experience, and I share a lot through my Instagram page around how I talk to the girls about how they were conceived. And for us, it's important that they've known from an early age, so that it is something that is a part of them. They don't remember being told, it's their normal, and it's all they've ever known. And for us to do that within our family unit, we felt it was important for our close family to know about it. What we didn't want is for one of our girls to maybe start talking about it. So Mila, my eldest, will quite happily talk about mummy's eggs were broken, and so we needed to use a donor. And what I didn't want them to have to face was a look of shock or confusion from someone else if they raised it. And so we had some conversations between ourselves about who needed to know. Now, obviously, because I do what I do and I blog, we are very, very open. And yet there are kind of other families that are less open. And I think it's a very personal decision and something you need to work through, maybe with a counsellor. And one of the things I've seen spoken about is the kind of the difference between privacy and secrecy, and you can still be private without it being a secret as well. So I do share a lot, and I've recently shared a blog with some kind of tips and things that I've learned about talking to your child and different books and things like that over on my Defining Mum blog page recently, because it is a question I get asked a lot. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Next question is finding a fertility counsellor. So where's the best place to go for a list of fertility counsellors who maybe specialise in donor eggs or sperm? Maybe Angela might be best to talk about this.
Yeah, so obviously I'm going to say this, but the British Infertility Counselling Association, on our website there is a page, Find a Counsellor. All the counsellors on there are either accredited with BICA or working towards their accreditation with BICA. I believe on Becky's Paths to Parenthood there is also a list of specialist fertility counsellors as well. And of course your clinics in the UK have a fertility counsellor or attached to a fertility counsellor.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. So I think it'd be interesting to talk about how your partners feel. So, for example, one attendee said, from a male perspective, how did your partner feel? If you, I think probably this is best for maybe Michael or Becky to answer.
Yeah, sorry, Michael. I'll
go for it.
I think I mentioned in my presentation that my husband Matt and I were on kind of very different places at different times, and actually I remember a time when we were first talking about it, and it was kind of quite early on through our IVF journey, and he was adamantly, no, I don't think we can ever do this. I don't think it's right for us, and that was a really difficult conversation, because when you're so desperate to be a mum, and like kind of the issue was with me, and I wasn't quite sure where we would go if we couldn't use a donor. I was desperate to experience pregnancy. And so it took time, and we kind of then went focusing back on my own eggs. And I think with each cycle, and he has written a blog for me about this, and he recently spoke on a webinar as part of Paths to Parenthood with another guy who also from a heterosexual relationship, and they shared their perspectives of, actually, I was grieving my own genetic loss, but also he was grieving the kind of the vision of the child that he'd always had, that would share half of my genetics as well. And so it is a process for both of you, and I think that's just a really important thing to understand. And the reason I held the webinar with two guys was to try and open up this conversation. And I hear from so many people that they struggle to get their husbands to engage with these sort of webinars and to have these conversations. And so I thought, kind of directly hearing from guys that have been there, who are now dads through using donor eggs, that would be helpful. But yeah, it is a process, and it needs talking. We didn't actually see a counsellor together. Matt wanted to work through things in his own way, and thankfully we got to where we are today, and he's very grateful for it as well. But yeah, it's not easy. Michael, sorry, I'll hand over to you now.
No, don't. You explained that perfectly. I cannot follow that. I think just to, the point that I would mention is obviously being in the same-sex relationship. We obviously had the benefit of one of us being genetically linked to one of our children. For us, it was again very similar to Becky. We went through our own fertility journey quite isolated, really. I wish we'd have spoken more about how we felt. Wes already had a biological child before we had Tallulah. So unknown to me, after Tallulah was born, Wes also suffered for sort of 3 to 6 months. And again, certain triggers due to language. And my only, I guess, not regret, but I just wish I'd have spoken more to him. And I wish we'd have shared more about how we felt, because I really put the pressure on for us to have a family. So I felt I was driving this. So my responsibility had been done, and the pin had been pulled, and everything else was ticking on. And totally speak to your fertility counsellor. There's some incredible counsellors out there, and there's some incredible counsellors out there that also have experience with LGBTQ counselling too. So I know there's some great counsellors on the website, so also check them out if that's applicable, or if you'd like a male counsellor.
Well, thank you all so much. That's all we've got time for this evening, unfortunately. I'm so sorry for everyone who has popped a question in. We don't have time to get around to, but do feel free to email me with anything. My email address is emily@fertilitynetworkuk.org. I'll then be able to get back to you soon this week. A recording of this webinar will be made available soon, and if you need any support, Fertility Network is there. We've got a support line, we've got support groups for all online. So our support groups are regional, so you can meet people in your area, but also we have same-sex groups, single-sex groups. We've got a lot of specialised groups if you like to meet people who maybe understand your experience more personally. So a huge thank you to our panellists, to Becky, Laura Rose, Angela and Michael. Thank you so much for your time this evening, and thank you to everyone who's joined us. So I'll leave it there. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.